The SCP is an entirely peer-based organization. This means that everybody on our staff identifies as being bereaved. Everyone has lived the pain of grief and found ways to cope. We recently had a workshop called Creative Coping Strategies. This workshop provided an opportunity for participants to learn from our staff about the many ways in which they've coped. We know that grief is an incredibly unique experience, and everybody's process in their grief is different. What works for one person might not work for another. But sometimes having options is the best thing possible. Being able to try different ways of coping and finding what works and what doesn't work. So we had the pleasure of bringing together several of our staff members to share about their unique coping skills. We had Don, who shared about stretching his comfort zone being a coping skill he learned in his grief following the death of his son, Joshua. Don is somebody who is not a fan of public speaking, yet one thing led to another in his advocacy work following his son's death that got him into situations where he was public speaking. As he did more and more of it, he realized that he felt better because he was doing something that initially made him incredibly uncomfortable. So to know that he could do something scary and to know that that scary thing could have such a positive impact on others is a way of coping for him. Next, we had Luke share about songwriting and performing as a way of coping. He shared a song with us that he wrote called Thinkful Wishing, which is a play on words on wishful thinking. And this is about a friend's death. He spoke about how cathartic it is to put his thoughts into writing and thoughts onto paper. And he mentioned that while he is a professional performer, a professional musician, you don't need to be a professional to be able to get involved in songwriting as a way of coping. He mentioned that the majority of the songs that he writes do not actually make it onto the stage, yet the sole act of writing these songs, getting those words out of his mind in a way that he could connect them is a way of coping for him.
Here's looking at you, kid. We partnered up and climbed so many good times on the skids. I wish that I could stop this, but I got no control. I wish you didn't have to go. It sucks, your luck had to run out. You pushed it to the edge, man, you really made it count. I'll say a prayer to you the next time that I roll. I wish you didn't have to go. I wish you didn't have to go. So long, adios amigo. Saying bye hurts me so. I'm frozen as I face this, the horror of the flow. I wish you didn't have to go. I wish you didn't have to go.
We then heard from Carrie, who spoke about photography and getting out in nature as a way that she copes. After her son's death, she found herself struggling with just being inside the house, but she found comfort just walking through the beautiful nature that is found on Cape Cod where she lives. She mentioned that she then got into photography because she saw so much beauty in nature that she wanted to share with people. She even shared a photo with us of a beautiful sunset that she recently experienced, where she felt compelled to write her son's name on sand. This is something that made her feel connected to him, and in that way, it was a way of coping for her. She mentioned that no one needs to be a professional. She's not a professional in terms of photography. It's just getting out and seeing the beauty in nature can really pull you from those deep and dark moments of grief. Then heard from Jill, who talked about earth altars. Earth altars is something that you can create in nature by grabbing flowers, twigs, stones, anything that's around you, and creating something that feels beautiful. Jill spoke about how incredibly therapeutic this process has been for her. She mentioned that she does it when she's grieving, but also it can help when we're grieving non-death losses, such as the loss of a relationship, a job, any of the other many things that we grieve as human beings. Jill shared some photos with the group on the different ways that these earth altars can look. She shared photos from nature where she left them in the woods, and she also shared photos of earth altars that she created in her home on a desk. She mentioned that this is a practice that is very unique, and each person can take their own approach to it. There's not one way to do it. It's just doing what feels right to you and to feel the effect that that can have on your grief journey. We also heard from Allie, who spoke about Kenpo karate as her way of coping following her mom's death. Allie mentioned that Kenpo karate is something that brought her not only an activity, but a sense of community. In her karate, she felt strong and she felt in control of her grief and in control of many other things. She spoke about the ways in which this was helpful to her in her grief, especially in her early days of grief, to have that routine, that structure, and that sense of normalcy that she had with this practice. However, she also spoke about the fact that she was injured to a point where she couldn't practice Kenpo karate for several months and what it felt like to have her coping tool that she had found after so many attempts of finding a coping tool taken away from her so suddenly. She spoke about the way in which she shifted her perspective and continued to practice in a non physical way, continued the learnings that she had gained from this practice. Ali mentioned that this is something that anybody can pick up and work their way up as much as they would like. While she's in pursuit of a black belt, it doesn't have to be that way. People can just start at a basic level and do it in a way that feels therapeutic to them. We then heard from Tabin, who spoke about gardening and creating things in nature. She shared photos of her garden at her home, which included flowers and gnomes and plants and edible herbs and all of the sorts. She mentioned just how therapeutic getting her hands into dirt, getting outside, creating something out of nothing has been in her grief journey following the death of her mom, but also following many other deaths. She spoke about the ways in which it's beautiful to see the garden's growth, to know that she created this, to see that every day when she leaves her home. She talked about the fact that it can be done in many ways. People don't need to create an entire garden at once. They can start with just creating one thing and taking it from there. But having that routine of watering, trimming, and seeing that growth has been incredibly helpful to her in her grief journey, and she encouraged others to give that a try. After Tavin, we heard from Melissa. Melissa spoke about beadwork and crafting. She spoke about the fact that this is a practice that she's had for over 30 years. She first started when her grandmother, who was very special to her, died. She created a bead out of something that she had gotten from her grandmother's old jewelry. And that just sparked a practice that has carried her throughout decades of grief and challenges, and that this is something she could always come back to calm herself, to give her something to do with her hands that takes her mind off things, and to create something beautiful that brings meaning to others. She talked about the ways in which she has shared these bead creations with friends and family and the impact that it has had on them. Just the beauty in seeing these different stones and beads, the way they light up with the sunlight hitting them, and how she places them throughout her house. At times, it makes her think about the loved ones that she created them in honor of. Other times, they just make her feel at home, a sense of calm that is difficult to find when we're grieving. Melissa provided tips for anyone to get started. You don't need to be a professional. She mentioned just a few simple pieces of equipment that you need to get started in this. And that, again, just like with many of the other coping tools that the others have shared, it's what works for you. Anybody can take whatever approach makes most sense to them and brings them the greatest sense of calm. Finally, round us out, we had Franklin share about meditation. He shared about his meditation practice that he's been engaging in for many years, Vipassana meditation, and how this practice has carried him through many different grief experiences. And it gives him something to come back to have a ritual, and to have a practice that he know will calm his mind when needed. He guided the group through what this practice entails, the way of breathing and thinking, and encouraged everybody to look into it further. He mentioned that meditation can seem daunting and intimidating for many. This is a practice that is very accessible, even for beginners. Overall, hearing from these individuals brought the participants a sense of comfort, knowing that there are many ways to cope, that if they still haven't found a way of coping that has worked for them, there are other things to try. Each person that shared their coping skill mentioned that it's not something that they were experts or perfect at in the first moment. It's practices that they've built across many, many years. And it's something that, again, anybody can just try. And if it doesn't work for you, that is fine. But finding what works for you will just be so helpful in the journey that is grief. And this is why we love what we do at PSEP. Being able to share tips and tools from individuals who truly understand the grief experience. While people have many different professional backgrounds, at PSEP, their personal background is what we consider to be expertise. And we love sharing that with the world. If this is interesting to you, feel free to reach out. We have tons more workshops coming up that could be helpful to anybody going through a grief journey or wanting to care for somebody going through a grief journey. Thank you so much.